There you go. I want everyone to squeeze here, just let's take a deep breath in. Close your eyes if you feel more comfortable. I'm going to sing in Hebrew one line, one verse from one of the Psalms, from Psalm 118, so we can regroup and refocus and be together. Coming from uniting all the different energies from different places. Coming in agreement to align ourselves with each other. Min hametzah karatia anani b'merchavya min hametzah karatia anani b'merchavya anani 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 v'merchavya anani 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 v'merchavya minamet sarkaratiya hanani v'merchavya. From that narrow place, I called to God. I called you. God answered me with expansiveness. That's from the Psalms, the book of Psalms, Psalm 118, verse 5. And I think that this verse captures the entire spiritual movement of Pesach, right? It describes a journey from the Metzar, from the narrowness, from that narrow place, Merchav. God, I call God, God answered me and took me and gave me Merchav and expansiveness. And Pesach is this, it's the journey from constriction to expansion, from the fear to what is possible, from limitation to what it means to be free or freedom. I don't think that is really about the national story only. I think it is also for us, those who speak spirituality and believe in spirituality. I think it's the map of a human soul as well. And now I ask you, all of you, because if you want to be in the 3 classes to get into Pesach in a better place with a better consciousness, if you want to celebrate Pesach this year doing the inner work, because it's so difficult sometimes, we get to Pesach and then it's like all the craziness. If you're doing the cooking, all the cooking, it's crazy. If you need to clean the house, cleaning the house, right? All the craziness. And if you are kind of like a very medactic, as it's called in Hebrew, like you are very strict with the rules and everything, you're going to drive everyone crazy as well. And to a point that you're going to enslave yourself from the celebration or the Festival of Freedom. And happens to a lot of people. They they enslave themselves, they become slaves of their own of the rules, and then it makes no sense that we are literally talking about freedom, celebrating the rupture of chains, but we enslave ourselves with the rules and with the clean, the craziness of being so clean, everything, and then the chametz and everything, we drive everyone crazy. So I don't think actually so much, to a point that one day, I thought really a few years ago that the rabbis were playing as a game. They were playing our minds, saying, maybe if you are able to realize what we are doing to you, that's actually going to be the one who's going to win the game. And I think what they were doing, in my perspective, after so many years understanding Pesach, is that they were playing this game. They wanted everyone to really follow the rules, but then they realized, I'm doing everything right, quote unquote, and I'm enslaving myself. I'm becoming a slave of my own tradition. I'm becoming a slave of the lacha, of the Jewish law. Crazy. But I would like to have the plateau, and the platform for everyone here. I would like to, if you can give me just a few words, what you think Pesach is all about. Anyone? When you think about Pesach, what is Pesach? If you need to explain Pesach to a non-Jewish person, it might be your guest. You want to invite them and say, hey, I want you to come to the Pesach Seder, and you want to explain to them what Pesach is. What would you say? Anyone? Don't be shy. Just open your mics and then just talk. I have big talkers here, so.
I can start.
Please.
What is Pesach? If I were telling it to someone who doesn't understand or wasn't raised in it, I would say it's the time that the Jewish people went from slavery to being free. So it's a time for us to reflect ourselves. What is it we are enslaved with or from, inside ourselves and outside of ourselves, and how can we walk towards freedom? But it carries on the traditions. I think a lot of people understand it more so than they realize, because if they're not raised in Jewish religion, they're raised, let's say, in Christianity, they kind of understand it. So I explain to them on both sides of it. But essentially, it's the Jews going from slavery to freedom.
Okay, perfect. Anyone else would like to share? Marcelo, Leslie, Mirna. You're muted, Marcelus. There you go. Now you're talking, but I don't hear you. You have the mic on?
You can hear me?
Yes, now yes.
Okay. So, no, agree with Debbie says. I want to add also that, it's a moment where we really begin the pueblo, like,
The nation.
nation, and a nation with the law. And this is extremely important because this is, what keep us today with the Torah and everything. So it's a nation with the law.
Nation with the law. Okay. Anyone would like to share? Mirna, no te preocupes, si quieres hablar en español, tranquila, yo traduzco.
Eso me limitaba.
That's okay.
Sí. Bueno, agregaría también que en esta celebración tenemos las plagas con las que Dios desafió a cada uno de los otros dioses y protegió a su pueblo.
Okay, so Mirna is saying that in this college, I know that you deal with Spanish speakers all day long, but just in case, for Leslie also, she's saying that we deal also with the 10 plagues where God defies, in a way, the other gods, and that way God also protects the Jewish people. Continúa, Mirna.
Y bueno, obviamente la libertad y ya más adelante, pues los pactos y todo eso, pero la celebración sería como libertad y bueno, el poder de Dios y cómo lo acompañó todo el tiempo en el desierto, cómo le proveyó de maná, de alimento, nada le faltó, mientras seguían lo que debían hacer. En el momento que ya, pues, se iba un poquito la protección, pero el cruce del Mar Rojo,
Okay,
este,
crossing the Red Sea.
sumamente impresionante.
Okay,
Sería ese.
a lot of movement. There's a lot of movement in Pesach, right? So, okay, so I want to take this into a different level, right? And trying to understand a little bit more what is behind Pesach, aside from what the Torah says, and the story and the Haggadah, which is, of course, the book that we use to retell the story. So the first thing I want to mention to you, I want to mention three things that are related, and then we're going to try to analyze and see how they are related in a way. Now we have the deal about Moses. If you remember, Moses had an impediment that has to do with speech. I don't know if you might remember that. Does anyone remember? Like he stuttered, right? I mean, he also says to God when God appears in the burning bush, la zarza ardiente, right? Like, he chose Moses. God chose Moses to be the leader, and he doesn't even believe himself that he can do it. So he started making excuses, and one of the excuses is like, I'm not good at speaking, right? So why people will listen to me, and then God of course has all the answers as well, and he says no worries. He doesn't say you're right, you're so stupid, you're not going to do it, you don't know how to do it, you have problems with speech. He says no, I'm going to make your brother to be the spokesman until you finally get to speak. And we know at the end of the Torah, we know that Moses speaks, actually, no little. He speaks a lot because the whole book of Deuteronomy, the last book of the Torah, is all about speeches from Moses, like tres discursos, right? So we know that Moses ends up speaking very, very well. I wouldn't say like Fidel Castro, but he speaks a lot, right? And so that's something to have in mind, because now we have the impediment of speech, okay? If you might want to even to remember how Moses says it in the Torah per se, right? It says, please, Adonai, my Lord, right? I am not a man of words, for I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. That's his excuse. Now, the future Redeemer of Israel, which is Moses, right? Someone who struggles with speech, and the question is why? That's what the rabbis ask. Everyone asks why. And some commentators explain that Moses, and the difficult for Moses to reflect, in a way, the spiritual condition of Egypt itself. And we're going to talk about that later, right? He had his own Egypt. We all have our own Egypt, right? And we're going to talk about what Egypt means. Hi, Laura. And so in Egypt, the people's voice was suppressed. Expression was constricted. You might remember that actually the Jewish people were talking. There was a moment where they say, start over. From the beginning of the book of Exodus, right? If you might remember how Genesis ends, Jacob dies, and the big son, the big child from Jacob, who made everyone come to Egypt, and he made Egypt very strong and big, was Joseph, right? Joseph ends up dying, and then the years goes by, and then the book of Exodus starts saying that there was a new Pharaoh who did not remember Joseph or what Joseph did, and then he was afraid, like the story of Purim that we had last week. Haman says, oh, there are these people who are dispersed and big in numbers, right? And there was the same thing happen in Exodus. So it's kind of a repeated story. Pharaoh says, they're big in numbers. Look, they have laborers and they have 6 kids and 6 children all at the same time, right? They're able to really have 6 kids, every time that they go to to labor, and then he was afraid that all the Jewish boys, all the newborn boys are going to die. And we know the story of Moses, right? Moses gets saved, and then Miriam and his sister and his mother, they rescue him, they put him in the basket, put him in the river Nile. Now Pharaoh's daughter is swimming, we know the song and everything, right? The prince, she was swimming, and she found baby Moses, right? And baby Moses grew up in the palace and the castle in Egypt until he's kind of 20 years old. Then he finds out but the thing is that the story starts saying that all the tribes move and grew in numbers in Egypt, but it doesn't say names. Even when we talk about Moses, Moses doesn't have a name. Moses doesn't have a name until actually Pharaoh's daughter found him. It's the son of a Levi woman who married a Levi man. There's no names. Everyone is nameless. Nobody has a name. No one. Even though Pharaoh's daughter doesn't have a name. We call her Batia, but that's not the name that it says in the Torah. Even Pharaoh doesn't have a name. Pharaoh means emperor, king, whatever, but it doesn't have a name. Right? Later, we found out in the history, probably it's Ramses, Ramses II, whatever. But then no one has a name. And the question is, why no one has a name? And one of the reasons that explains the rabbi is they don't have a name until they identify and recognize that they have a problem. So for 400 years, almost 250 to 400 years, it's almost like God forgot about these people. And it's not until they say, ouch, it hurts, and we talk about this many times, is that when they say, ouch, it hurts. And God remembered them. That's what it says in the Torah. And God remembered them. They raise their hand and they say, hey, it hurts be here in enslavement. And until then, no one has a name, because no one has a voice. So here is a parallel of what happened with Moses, right? People's voice were suppressed. Expression was constricted. So redemption, therefore, begins with the gradual restoration of the speech. And have that in mind when I talk about the speech, okay? So the idea of restoration of speech, right? If you think Moses struggles to speak, later he becomes one of the one who teaches the whole Torah, as I said before, to the entire nation. So have this in mind, that liberation, freedom, is not only a political freedom, but it's the recovery of our authentic voice. Voice, speech, for those who are into spirituality, throat chakra, da'at, for those who study a little more Kabbalah, this is the center over here, the voice, the throat, the speech. Now, what is the throat in Kabbalah per se, right? Because the Kabbalistic teachings, when they talk about the throat, called in Hebrew the garon, garon. So interesting, because the word itself has like a guttural, right? Like a guttural type of sound, garon. If you're Israeli, you say garon. It's here, right? Like you can't escape the words and thinking that you're doing with your throat, right? This cannot be, the gu and the r, both. And so the Kabbalistic teaching, it says that the garon, the throat, represents the channel between the inner consciousness and expression. The channel between inner consciousness and expression. And then the Zohar will come, and describes that Egypt is a place of constricted flow, in a way that spirituality or spiritual energy could not move freely. Okay, so you might start seeing a little bit of what we're trying to talk about. So the channel of inner consciousness and expression. And Egypt was constricted flow. So things that were not really, the spiritual energy could not really move freely. was stagnant, it was blocked, right? Startled, like Moses. So the throat, the garon symbolizes the passage where thought become speech. What a bridge, what a channel. And many people have that problem sometimes, right? The idea that the thought becomes speech. Now, not even talking now that if you lie to yourself and you thinking something and you say something different. I have a sore throat. Oh, really? I might wonder why. I have thyroid's problem. Oh, I might wonder why. Right? Because if you betray yourself most of the time, like most of us learn how to do, to think something or to feel something and say something totally different, just to comply, just to please this one and to please the other one, and not saying the real truth for fear or whatever it is. Most of the time we have issues around all this area. All this area. That's why I say the thyroid, maybe your glands here, maybe sore throat, pharynx, larynx, tongue. So when a person is in Egypt, right, this channel becomes blocked and sick. Fear, shame, trauma. Those are the things that usually silence our voices. So again, speech, impediment, voices, now people speaking, they recognize they have an issue, they call for help. Now God, remembers them. Now they have a voice, they have a name, they have authenticity. So the journey of Pesach is for many, and it should be or could be the movement from locked expression to liberated speech. A biggie. It's not easy. It's not easy, especially in our lives, in our world. It's not easy. And also with the way we learn from our parents, sometimes it's not easy. So in a way, what begins as a cry in slavery eventually becomes the story of redemption told at the Seder. Right? Remember, in the Seder, we retell a story. So it begins in a cry, slavery, and becomes a story of redemption told at the Seder table. Talking about expression, there are 4 cups, right? In Pesach, we have 4 cups. Yes. And each cup represents an expression of redemption. You might remember. And there's these expressions of redemption, expresiones de redención, they are written in the Torah. That's why we have 4 cups. The first one says, I will bring you out of Egypt. The second expression of redemption says, I will rescue you. The third expression of redemption says, I will redeem you. And the fourth expression of redemption says, I will take you to be my people. So I will bring you out, I'll rescue you out, I will redeem you, and then I will take you to be my people. Those are the 4 redemption expressions of redemption. Right? Physical release from suffering. That's I will bring you out. Freedom from oppression. I will rescue you. Right? Physically, I will release you and then I'll take you from suffering. Okay, that's not enough. Now I need to give you freedom from oppression because that's rescuing you from taking you physically. Now the third one, it says, I will now redeem you in for Jewish spirituality means it's inner redemption and transformation because, okay, I took you physically from this place, like take a, like a very bad, it's an example, but, just for you to understand, right? There might be, let's see, actually you have someone kidnapped, right? Like, for example, what happened in October 7th, right? Those who were kidnapped, they were rammed, and then they took them out, right? Now, Physically, they brought them out. Then they rescue, yes. But now what they have felt, what they have lived through, what went through and everything, it's not that you can take that out. You took them out from that darkness. You took them out from rescue them. But now talk to any of them, and you'll see, like any person who has a traumatic events in life. To be redeemed is the most difficult part of it, which is the inner redemption and the transformation of what you did or what you do with that experience that you had. That's the most difficult one. And that probably might take a lot of years. For some people, it never happens. Think about any of us. We don't need to specifically say that out loud, but think about any traumatic moment in your life. And if you think about it and it still hurts, you didn't redeem yourself and didn't do the transformation yet. You still have pain. And that's okay. I'm not saying that you are not, okay for having that. But that's what it means really to be self-redeemed or inner redeemed and also transformed. That's why I say if you're working on that, it takes a lot of years. That's why people go to therapists, people go through life. But you can go through life also without talking about that because it hurts a lot. It's a very, very deep wound and it's not easy. And then the last one, entering a relationship with the divine. In other words, it's very difficult by having these 4 expressions of redemption. What we are learning and understanding, and it is very difficult to have a relationship with the divine unless sometimes you do the inner work. When you are afraid, when you are tired, when you are frustrated, when you relieve that traumatic moment and you have anger, it's very difficult from that space, from that point, from that place to have a healthy relationship with the divine. It is difficult. It's not that God is not there. It's not that God just listens to you when you are in good terms. No, but it's difficult for you to really have that relationship because behind the scenes and everything, you might be mad at the person who might traumatize you or might be the person who harmed you. But at the end of the day, at the end of the whole chain, you might be mad at God. And sometimes we don't want to recognize it, but sometimes we are so mad at God. Because if you're mad at any God's creature, you're mad at God. And you're mad at the situation. If that's something that didn't have to happen to you, right? If we feel God manage all our lives or manage, situations and behind everything is God, then behind that situation, as horrible as it could be, it's also God. So if you're mad at that situation, you're still, without having that that moment of transformation or trying to work through healing and redemption, then behind the scenes, even if we don't want to acknowledge it, it's also God. And it hurts. It hurts. Actually, the Hasidim says that if you anger is equal to idolatry. If you're mad at the situation, you are mad at this person, you are mad at your employer, wherever it is. If you're mad at the person who's hanging, like behind you, and sticking the middle finger, in the middle of traffic, those are situations for you to see if you have passed, if you have tested out, the exam. Those are situations, for you to know. At least this is from the Hasidic point of view. If you're mad at a situation, that means you are mad at God. if you're mad at God that he produced you anger, then the rabbis have called that idolatry. You don't believe that actually God is doing is God's doing. If you don't believe that God's doing, then you believe in something else. So anger becomes idolatry. It's a very interesting point of view. How, yes, Marcelo.
If this is true, everyone is idolatry because it's impossible to not get anger for something that happened to you. It's impossible. So I don't think that anyone in here or any place is not getting angry, and I
Of
don't
course.
think that it's idolatry because again, it's human life.
And I think that what the rabbis have wanted to put is to put it in a situation where you feel, what do you mean? It's idolatry. I believe in God. What do you mean? I don't believe in other gods. I say, but you believe in other gods because that's what they're trying to call your attention. It is true. It's human nature. It's human nature to love things. Human nature to have jealousy. It's human nature to be envy. It's human nature to be angry, right? What they're trying to teach you is every situation is something for you to learn. If you can actually conquer your anger through the situations in life, as hard as they can be, right? Some people get mad, get angry, for very little things. Other people get mad and angry for what we can call a very big situation, right?
Okay.
And then what the rabbis have tried all the time, thinking about how we polish our character traits, how we become more polished, in a way, what they're trying to say is, if God is behind everything, God is behind also the situations that happen in your life. In a way, there are other parts of this that will come for the class that we talk about anger specifically, because there's a huge class about anger, that comes from your own reality, what you create, to test yourself out as well. Maybe.
So I hear everything that you're both saying, and it's very true. And I'll give my personal experience on this because I lived this for a while, for years, that the things that happened to me, the trauma that happened to me, I had every right to be angry, to for a lot of people, to be angry at a lot of people, specifically one person, specifically as well as myself and God and everyone. And it took me a lot. I was just thinking about the four cups, and it's a brilliant way to look at life and the healing process or the grieving process. I was never angry at God, ironically. I just wondered, I used to ask why. Why did this happen to me? Why this? Why? Because it was some really bad stuff for a lot of years. And, it got me to be on my knees, literally and figuratively. And I got the answer. And the answer was, well, you went through this and I was always there. And you survived. And, I got you out of it. That's, again, the first or second cup. And it was to go and help other people. Because had I not gone through the trauma that I went through, I would have been in a whole different life. I would not be sitting here. I would not be talking to you. I would have never met you, Rabbi, obviously. And so, it's the butterfly effect. They say everything happens for a reason. The stars line up so that you can be here. And so, what I did was, I didn't want to live in that anger space because it does become idolistic, so to speak. It's like it becomes that big dark cloud that everything is based on and everything is measured by. This is what happened to me, and I have a right to be angry. And it's like anger touches every single piece in relationship and your work and your career. And I'm back in school. It touched everything, and especially towards myself. And when I gave it up to God and I got the answers, because I really had to get quiet, um, and listened, and it was, well, I had you go through this so that you can help other people in similar situations. And then, I went from being in that narrow space to expansive. And I went from being angry to helping people on a very, very broad spectrum and an international spectrum. I went from being very closed in, living and hiding in a closet to speaking publicly on an international level because of what I went through. I turned that anchor and I flipped it around. And it's impacted my life and into a whole different, and I'm just beginning into a whole different direction that I never expected. And these classes, and of course, you, Rabbi, I'm not gonna sing your praises because I don't need to in this crowd. But it takes a lot of work. It definitely takes. I mean, I don't drink those 4 cups of wine anymore. They might be filled with water or club soda now. But I will say that I can understand that. It's quite interesting. I'm gonna have to borrow that when I do my workshops.
Anytime.
So yeah, it's beautiful, and it's true. It is a narrow lane, just like in the past, and it expands. So it's a beautiful lesson.
And when you mention about expansion, remember again, how I started the class from the narrow place
Mm-hmm.
all to God, and God answered me
Mm-hmm.
with expansiveness.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Absolutely.
so important, because the idea of expansiveness, the idea of expansion, of consciousness is what will bring us, and we talk about this so many times, right? Give us that kind of like the view of a drone that we can see better, right? So when we see better and we are not narrow, like a horse type of narrowness, now we can see what's outside, what's inside. We can see more, and we give expansiveness. That means consciousness. We can see more light. Then it's easier. It hurts less.
Everything hurts less. It's like you let go of things. Somebody wants to go ahead of me, God bless, go ahead. In any situation, there's no holding on to anything. It's beautiful. And you were talking about the throat chakra. I have the tree of life on my wall. I have the word discernment, which really makes a big difference.
Correct.
Really, yeah, it really does. And having those boundaries, which helps.
Yeah, and that's what that is, right? When we call in Kabbalah, this center over here, that is discernment. Exactly what you're just saying. It's more than just a throw. It's discernment. It's so important to have that in mind. So again, I wanted to start with this idea of Moses' impediment to speech, the 4 level of the 4 expressions of redemption. And this idea, because again, Pesach for me is all about a conversation. It's all about speech. It's all about narrating. Everything comes from here. So connected, Pesach, with the center over here. The Haggadah means narration. The Haggadah that we read, we're retelling the story, right? If you go even further, the rabbis love to play with 2 words that are so related to the speech, to the words, to the mouth. For example, when we think about the word Pharaoh, right? In Hebrew we say paro, but you can take the word paro in Hebrew and say pe ra. Pe means mouth and ra means evil. So Pharaoh, right, who really is Pe-Ra, right, can be also read symbolically, as representing the corrupted voice. Some people might want to call it evil voice, the evil voice, right? But it's the inner voice, really, of us, of all of us, that says you cannot change, nothing will ever be different, or stay where you are, or gossip, rechilut, right, lashon hara, right? That's what it's called. So Pharaoh, paro, perra, Pharaoh, it's really the voice of internal oppression. That's the oppression. That's sometimes we do it to others, but we are able to do it to ourselves. That's why we can say this to our parents, we can say to our partners, to our spouses, to our children, to our students, friends, and co-workers, because it's the voice that keeps us enslaved to old identities. It's not authentic. It's old identities. Can be also the programs of our generations and our ancestors repeating things that don't even serve us anymore, enslave us instead. We're repeating the words And we are repeating the words of generations, of our grandparents, great-grandparents, right? We have sayings in our family sometimes. And not necessarily are identities of today or ours or authentic. They're from them. And we keep them as a loyal, invisible loyalty. And on the other side, as you know, our Mr. Tevye, the milkman, will say, on the other hand, right, we have now the mouth that speaks. And what is if we have the evil or the corrupted mouth or voice, we have now the mouth that can speak, and that's Pesach. You see, pe again from mouth, sach. Sach comes from the word sicha. Sicha is a conversation. And so is the mouth now that can speak or can tell. The one that is able that's symbolically what it represents for the rabbis, right? Because I think it's remarkable, that they can play with paro, perra, and then pesach. So that's the mouth that speaks up. Speaks up. It's not just speaks. And this is not, I think, a linguistic curiosity. I think it reflects the central mitzvah of the whole holiday and the central purpose and mission of the full holiday of Pesach. Remember, the Torah commands the following. It says, and you shall tell your child on that day, and you have to say, it is because of what the Lord or God, right, did for me when I came out of Egypt. Remember when we have the four children, right? And one of them asked, what is Pesach? What is it all about? And that's kind of one of the answers. So the key word here in Hebrew is vehigadeta, and you shall tell. And this is the same word. Higadeta is where it comes Haggadah, the Haggadah, right? So Pesach becomes the holiday of speech. And I think that unlike many other holidays, the central ritual of Pesach is not something we build or even perform. I think it's something we say. And remember also that Pesach, the Seder is all about questions and answers. It's all about conversation, right? It's questions and answers, questions and answers. And we want to keep the kids, awake. We even bribe them, with desserts and gifts and the afikoman, right? The afikoman and everything. And because the Seder revolves around, from the 15 steps of Pesach, one of them, and the longest, is called the Magid, where it starts Manishtana, right? The first of the questions. Why is this night different from other nights? So the Magid is the narration, is the longest of all the 15 steps of Pesach. And you know what? That the Mishnah, one of the major books after the Torah, it says that one begins with disgrace and ends with praise. That's what the Mishnah says in the tractate called Pesach, Pesachim, right? And the answer is kind of the purpose of the narration is not simply historical, as we just spoke before. It is transformational. So one begins with disgrace and ends with praise. So this is transformation, right? Through telling the story, we begin to rewrite our own story. And that's so important because at the end of the day, the idea is to really how we free ourselves, or how we identify first our inner Egypt. Sometimes we don't even know. Actually, the people of Israel didn't even know that they were enslaved. They didn't realize that they were not in expansiveness. They took that as granted. That's why it says later on, the rabbi says that it was more difficult, that it was more difficult. It was more difficult for to take Egypt out of the Israelites than take the Israelites out of Egypt. You see what I mean? It was more difficult to take Egypt outside of them than to take them physically outside of Egypt. And we have the same situation. As I said before, we might get out from many situations. We might even get out from a relationship and we enter another one and we still have the Egypt inside of us. That's why actually that relationship, we think that the Messiah has come, the special man, the special woman, wherever, the special one. And then we repeat the same situation because the Egypt is inside of us. The limitations, the quality limitations that we still have, that we enslave ourselves with, the programmation, the program and the software and the traumas and everything still inside of us, and we're still repeating the same story because we didn't really get Egypt out of us. We're still with Egypt inside. We change locations, right? People say if you have problems, the problems is going to go with you anywhere you go. It's not that you think that I changed I switched from countries to another place. I changed, relationships, employment, etc. And if you really think about it, many times we still kind of, one way or another, at one point in the history, we're still repeating the same pattern. Why? Because we didn't recognize or identify that first, that we have an Egypt inside, that we have a narrow place. If we don't recognize we have a narrow place, it's very difficult to work on something. But when I recognize I have limitations, great. Let's work on this. Whether it's character traits, whether it's qualities, whether it's patterns, whatever it is, once we recognize and you're honest to yourself, great. I recognize my inner Egypt, how I can really work on this. And work on this, the suggestion of what this class is all about is Pesach, it's just have that talk, have that identity, have that voice, work on it. It's not about spitting out, anger. No, it's about say the truth. And the truth might hurt. It might hurt because it's about you. It's not about anyone else. It's not about taking It's about taking responsibility. It's not about talking about others, because that's not what is going to take you out of Egypt. Because now the Israelites are out. They cannot really blame Pharaoh. Now they blame Moses and then blame the food and then they blame God. If you remember the story, the whole Torah, they are blaming all the time. You took me out of Egypt. We were better there, right? God, you just throw this manna thing. My God, we are hungry. We used to have all this type of food in Egypt, right? So they couldn't really fathom this, and they couldn't see. Even when they crossed the Red Sea, there are commentators and rabbis, have said many couldn't really see the miracle. They were so worried about the mud, and the clothes and the rain, the water, but they couldn't see the miracle. So they were complaining. And this is what happened in our lives many times. We have so much Egypt ingrained on, inside of us that it's so difficult, to see this. And so just again, notice the sequence. The children of Israel groaned under the bondage and their cry rose to God. That's what I said before. They say, ouch, it hurts. So notice just the sequence again. First comes the cry. And it's only afterward begins the redemption. And then liberation, freedom begins when the voice emerges. Silence is now the language of oppression, and speech is the language of freedom. You get that last part? No? So remember that the first thing that you need in order to redeem yourself is inner identification, honesty. Because again, it was not until they groaned or they cried out and they screamed and they say, hurts, that their cry actually rose to God in a way that God responded to that. So, number one, identify your Egypt and say, it hurts. I can't live with this anymore. We might have Egypt, like inside of us, that narrow place that limits us for so many things, for so long, that has ruined probably so many aspects, of our lives. Whatever it is, it's relationship with others, could be with God or with your own self. And once you really identify that, you scream, I don't want this anymore. It doesn't help. It doesn't hurt. It's enslaving me. And I'm the only one responsible for this. And only that, when we come with that, is that we have sequence step number 2. That begins the redemption. Cry, redemption. 3, liberation. Because now the voice emerges. Now we're speaking about it. We are saying out loud. We are not afraid. We are not ashamed. Our voice, the real voice, the truth is emerging. And silence, it doesn't help. Silence in this case doesn't help. Because it's the language of oppression. The only thing that helps is speech, because it's the language of freedom. So as a homework for each of you and every one of you, hopefully you start thinking, next week there is no class, but the following and the following before Pesach, right? The 19th and the 26th, we're going to continue with this work. So hopefully you can do some homework in the next 2 weeks, identify where is that chametz, all right? What is that? What is that things that the ego doesn't allow you, your own ego, that inflates and, like the flour, like the wheat, like the barley, right? What is that? Is that what is that limitation? What is that Egypt of yours that has grown probably for years? Whatever that is, work on it, write about it, speak about it, even to yourself. Look at the mirror. You don't need to speak with someone else, right? But just go through it, because that's the real chametz that we want to get rid of. That's the one that we burned the day before Pesach. It's not just about when you clean your house. It's not about just, meticulously, just go crazy and clean. Be sure that you clean yourself inside. That's the real work of Pesach. And it starts now. Just right after Purim. 30 days after Purim is Pesach. This is the time. Orthodox communities, they start cleaning right now. They started just the day after Pesach, after Purim. On Tuesday, Wednesday, they were already starting. Yesterday they started to clean. That's why I wanted to talk about this. So I don't know what you're doing in your homes. I don't know how you keep kosher now in your homes for Pesach, but be the most kosher person that you can be for yourselves. Be truth and be true to yourself, honest, brutally, radically honest, and do the work. Each of us have something different to work on. Originally, rabbis said that we need to work on 3 things at least. I would say 1 is enough. If you can't even take 1, how are you going to take 3? Why they say 3? The reason is that the word matzah and the word chametz, they have 2 letters in common, but 1 that is not. Right? The mem and the tzadi, matzah, chametz, they are in both words. But the chet and the hey, one is number 8 and the other one is number 5. And if you subtract them, it's 3. 8 minus 5 is 3. So they say you need to work on 3 things, right? In order to flatten the chametz and become matzah, you need to work on 3 things. Work on one. If you can work on one, you'll be happy. If you can work on 3, woo, great. But that's mainly what the real work of Pesach. And I tell you something, in the last years, at least the last 10 years, if I've gotten to Pesach and I haven't done any of this work, I feel like I'm just doing nothing. Just retelling a story, right? Passing generation to generation. Maybe I'm passing generational trauma too, why not? And then they have to do the work. So if we do the work, I don't know if you know, but when you do generational trauma work, when you do the work, you are cleaning and healing 10 generations from your ancestry and 10 generations from your descendants. So you doing the work, you're helping 20 generations. That comes from the therapeutic work, okay? It's just amazing. So if you're here, you're listening to this, do the work. You might help so much your descendants, your children, and everyone who came in the past who have probably suffered and enslaved themselves, and for whatever reason it is. You can help so much your family, and you can help so much yourself to live a real, authentic life with a real voice. I hope that we learned something together. Hopefully we have the homework, and hopefully you can do the homework. Nobody's going to push you, and I'm not going to call you, hey, you did the homework. No, I mean, we're all adults here, so we can really be accountable for our own selves. And in the meantime, I'll see you in 2 weeks. Okay?
Thank you. It was beautiful, as always.
Thank you for being here.
Of course. Right.
Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Good night.